Hello, sir.
Hello, Shrita.
Sir, recently the Tamil Nadu Assembly Speaker JCD Prabhakar, while speaking at the National March for Life rally, has stated that life begins at conception and that every unborn child has dignity. So, what is your first reaction to a sitting Assembly Speaker telling this to 5,000 people at a religious rally, stating this?
No, every unborn child has dignity is something that we all accept. That is no longer a problem. But from the language, it appears they are borrowing the American political and activist language. If the idea is to prevent women from having abortion rights, from having control over their body, then we must immediately nip it in the bud. There are a lot of areas where a great country like America should be emulated. We have a lot to learn from them: technology, innovation, many financial instruments, many other things, the good part. And political practices, some of the better practices: internal party democracy, accountability, separation of powers. There are also a lot of bad ideas in America which we should shun. This mindless imitation of everything that America does is not a very good thing. For instance, India has had a law since 1971, Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. We are one of the first countries to recognize the women's right over their bodies, give dignity to women, and give the decision-making power to carry the pregnancy or not to the women, with certain caveats. And once the unborn fetus becomes viable, typically medical science says 24 to 28 weeks. Below 24 weeks, generally not viable. Below 20 weeks, definitely not. So above that, abortions are generally discouraged unless there is a compelling reason. Either the mother's health, her life is in danger, or the baby has so many severe congenital abnormalities that the baby is not viable or the life would be unbearable. But otherwise, women are given the freedom. We are a remarkable country. See, despite the fact that 99% of Indians are God-fearing. You may be Christian, you may be Muslim, you may be Hindu, you may be Sikh, you may be Parsi, you may be any other faith in the country, Buddhist. But in India, our political system, with all the defects, and there are many defects, we criticize them, it has the ability to transcend these issues and go for progressive legislation. And that's how MTP Act came in 1971 when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, by unanimous consent of Parliament. There was not one voice of protest in the country, outside or in Parliament inside. So the good things we have done, we should continue. Our women have been enjoying these rights.
Your life doesn't really change because the party wins in the election. It changes because the system works or doesn't. That is what we discuss here. Subscribe to this channel if you would rather understand the system than pick a side.
So the good things we have done, we should continue. Our women have been enjoying these rights. Take, for instance, gun control. From the beginning, after independence, India has very strongly controlled gun ownership and carrying a gun. So we may have many problems, but we don't have the fear, or women or men or children, when they go out on the street, there's no fear. My God, anybody you approach may be a gun-toting fellow. Carrying a gun, he may shoot you. A policemen are not afraid that any citizen they see at the stop on the traffic highway or something else potentially carries a gun and maybe he can be dangerous. We don't have that fear. Now, supposing you follow the American practice, because Second Amendment in America, in a very peculiar way, says citizens have right to carry guns. It's a very questionable interpretation. And therefore, Indians also must have the license or right to carry guns, bear arms. It's a very silly notion. There are some things where India is doing extremely well. Let us not invent problems. There are some things where we have to improve things. We have to learn from the best practices of other countries. But in those cases, let's learn from the other countries. Let's not confuse between which and which. And abortion rights and women's rights are certainly not an area where India should borrow from America or American conservative wing.
Sir, you have spent your career arguing that public office should serve everyone equally, no matter their religion. So, how do you see it when the Assembly Speaker himself stands up at a rally and preaches this in that official role?
No, our constitution guarantees religious faith. You can practice the faith you want and propagate it in whatever manner you deem fit, as long as there's no forcible conversion or inducement, etc. So your faith in your God is your private business. I have no business. The state has no business. But there's a line religion cannot cross. For instance, in every religion, there has been oppression of several vulnerable groups throughout history. Women were subjugated in all religions. In Hindu religion, for instance, women were not allowed to remarry. Child marriage was prevalent. At one time, women were bought, or actually girl children were bought or sold with a bride price as if they were cattle, and so on and so forth. Now, these are not practices we will tolerate, right? We have to reform them. If somebody says, this is my religion, sorry, the religion is about your God and your worship, not about certain practices which are inimical to the fundamental rights and the human dignity of the vulnerable sections. And therefore, those in public life in particular, and even otherwise all citizens, they must recognize the right to practice your own religion and faith is different from the rights of individuals guaranteed under the Constitution. If that line is crossed, generally in India that line is not crossed. We may, as I said before, we may blame our politicians for many things that are wrong. But in general, our political system is wise because that's very much part of Indian tradition. Our Indian tradition says, Ekam Sat, Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. Truth is only one. Wise men pursue it in different ways, on different paths. So that is a central tenet of Hindu philosophy, if there is any such thing. So that has been the practice in this country across all religions. That's why we got some of the most progressive legislation in India about women's rights, about divorce, about abortion rights, about human rights, many other things. There's hardly any resistance in India when the legislation of this kind is made, about elimination of untouchability, about removal of caste discrimination, about affirmative action policies. Generally in India, there is an impressive consensus. And these areas, religion has no place. If somebody says caste is integral to Hindu religion, and therefore some people must be treated as untouchables, Indian constitution, Indian law, Indian society will not tolerate it, period. So I can go on and on. I think people in public office in particular must never get into these things, because when things are going well, don't disturb them. When things are going badly, let us examine where it has gone badly or is going badly and set it right. But let us not complicate problems. Let us not solve problems that already have been solved long back. We are now creating questions or problems when the problems do not exist. And definitely, women's right over their bodies and women's rights in general, including divorce, including dignity, are no longer a matter of question. And even if there were some blemishes in our legal framework, we have corrected over time. For instance, in the abortion law, very liberal abortion law in 1971, certain blemishes were corrected in 2021 by a parliamentary amendment, again unanimous. For instance, the adultery law in India, section 497 of the old IPC, I think. You know what the adultery law says? If there is an adultery, that means an extramarital relationship, the woman is never guilty. It is the man who is guilty. Even if the woman is somebody's wife. Because what was the underlying notion? That a woman is the property of the man. And therefore you have stolen that property, therefore you are guilty as a man. Good that women are not criminalized. The issue is not that. The issue is the underlying thinking that woman is property. That's a nonsensical notion. So quite rightly the Supreme Court has quashed that law and now it's decriminalized. Adultery is not criminalized at all. So even when we committed some mistakes, they have been removed. And that is a good tradition. And there is almost no political controversy or opposition about gender rights, about gay rights, about other matters. India has been one of the most progressive countries. I think we must leave it at that, and people in public office should not bring religion into politics. And we must recognize that political system in India, with all its faults, is actually acting very honorably, very sensibly in these matters. Let us not upset the apple cart. In the United States, for instance, in 1973, in a famous case, Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court said women have the right over their bodies, therefore they have abortion rights. For about 50 years, 2 generations, that was the law of the land. Women enjoyed that right. But some well-meaning activists, but very narrow-minded activists, very arch-conservative activists, like, Phyllis Schlafly. Phyllis Schlafly was a very well-meaning housewife in one of the states in the United States. What did she do? When an Equal Rights Amendment Act, that means men and women should have equal rights under the Constitution, was what was proposed. She single-handedly mobilized traditional women to say, no, we don't want this equal rights. We want the traditional attitudes about men and women to prevail, and she got it defeated. She opposed abortion rights of women. And an issue which was not a political issue, because of her work and the work of people like Marjorie, I think Danny Felser and others, it became a central political issue for the Republican Party. And finally, in 2021, the US Supreme Court reversed its own judgment in the DUB case or DAB case, I think, and said that ultimately the states must decide there is no right for abortion by the Supreme Court verdict. And the country is now in turmoil. Even now, many states gave the women the right. State laws were enacted, but in some states they criminalized it. We are actually going back in time rather than going forward in time. So we must not ever allow these issues to become political. There are some issues which should be debated politically, some issues on which there is a total consensus, and India is very fortunate that our political parties, whom we very often revile with some good grounds, but on these matters they act with enormous good sense and enormous fairness and enormous sense of the future. And we should relish that, we should encourage the parties to behave like that. We should not imitate America and all these polarizing societies which unnecessarily unearth problems that do not exist. There are plenty of problems, real problems in India. How do you combat unemployment? How do you improve education and skills? How do you have sensible urbanization to give everybody a chance? How do you link industry with agriculture? And a whole lot of other problems. How do you improve the healthcare? How do you improve rule of law in the country? How do you decentralize power? Please focus on the real issues which matter. Do not focus on issues which are already settled very satisfactorily in a modern, progressive way in the country. Do not create problems because somebody is egging you on. Some group, somebody has a bee in the bonnet. They want to create a problem. They want to raise a non-issue, make it an important issue. And in this day of social media era, anybody with some resources can manipulate the country or set the agenda, which is detrimental to our national interest, our general public interest and women's interest. I think we should nip it in the bud.
Sir, as you've mentioned, the politicization of such issues, in this instance, abortion rights, even though we've mentioned that we should nip it in the bud, as you've said, do you think this might happen in India in the future?
Not at all. I'm very confident about our society. Whatever be the religion, I'm not arguing that we're all great people. That's not my argument at all. In fact, no group, no culture, no nation can claim that they are inherently great. But there is something in our society, with all our illiteracy and ignorance and sometimes superstition, where our prejudices and our narrow ideas, they are allowed to go only this far and no further. There's an inner compass. Because of centuries, millennia of coexistence, compulsions of coexistence, India became a syncretic society. All cultures. So there's no country with greater diversity than India: caste, region, religion, language. And no, you name every single diversity in the world exists in India. And despite that, and maybe because of that, because we coexisted for such a long period, we realized that we should not cross a line. We must let people live their own lives. Unless there is a reason why the state should intervene, the law should intervene. That's a general principle in these matters. And generally, Indian lawmakers have been always progressive, pro-reform, pro-improvement of the human condition, pro-human rights, pro-women's rights, pro-children's rights. Sometimes we may be committing mistakes because of inadequate experience or sometimes unwisdom. But in general, our direction is always pro, and every party, without exception, right, left, right, center, religious parties, non-religious, secular parties, all parties generally stay together. All these legislations I mentioned, they all came by unanimous consent of all the parties across the country. I think that should be preserved, and that will be preserved. I'm very confident of that. But meanwhile, there will be some rabble rousers, because they're influenced by some groups. They want to make a name for themselves, they want to be visible, or they may have some other considerations, or they may genuinely believe in their cause, however unwise that cause is. They have the ability to create a bit of a noise. But I think as a society, we must be alert and nip it in the bud, so that what is dominant in our society as a prevailing view, consensual view of live and let live, we must make sure that that prevails.
Sir, as you said, this is also coming from a new political party, despite the speaker being a seasoned politician, because newer parties try and establish their own form of communication, their language, etc. So, how do you think other parties as well as TVK should react to this?
If they think there is some vote bank politics involved there, or if they want to play that kind of politics, they're playing with fire. Maybe this has arisen because the leader of TVK party is broadly believed to be associated with a certain faith. That's entirely his right. But I'm sure the party and their leader have the wisdom to recognize that personal faith and practices are different from the law that is imposed on the people and society. Because if you take religion too seriously in secular affairs, in matters of social practices and law, then modern society cannot exist. For instance, take Catholic religion, generally opposed to abortion. But Catholic religion also is opposed to divorce. It's also opposed to birth control. Now, is that what anybody wants in 21st century? A society where women have no right to divorce? A society where there is no birth control, therefore, even if you don't want a baby, you have unwanted children? You cannot even prevent the conception? Or after conception in the early stage, for whatever reason, if it's unwanted pregnancy or if the mother's health is physical or mental health under the law is in jeopardy, or for some other valid reason, if they want to undergo abortion, you prevent that? What kind of a world is that? So, parties, new or old, young or old, they must realize that there's a limit beyond which statecraft should not enter your bedroom. That is for our families, for our women to decide what they want with their families. You cannot bring in the law there. Now, if that restraint is observed, then I think it will be all right. But if you take religion seriously in matters like this, then life will be unbearable. As I said before, in India, our society will not tolerate it. Our society has a very consensual approach in these matters. There's unanimity without any single opposition in parliament or assemblies on these matters. For instance, family planning. India was one of the first countries to adopt. We did not force it. During emergency, we forced it. Nasbandi. The party in power at that time paid the price. But otherwise, generally, we did not force it. We created the facilities. We tried to educate people and give them some minor incentives so that their life becomes a little more bearable. But women themselves and the families themselves realize that they can't have too many children. Better to have fewer children and then raise them well. And because child mortality also came down, there was a greater sense of confidence about the future. Family planning came automatically. China forced it down the throats of the people. They said you shall have only one child, more than one child is criminalized. You will not be allowed. So many women were forced to discard their female children, the firstborn female children, on the streets where they died or they were picked up by some people to be adopted by some other country. We never did that. So, and yet we are able to contain the population. Now India is reaching population stabilization level. In the next 10-15 years, we'll reach the peak, and after that, slowly we'll taper off, and slowly we'll start declining. That is the right way. People's willing consent and create conditions, better health care, better nutrition, better for women education, better information to people. Don't force it down their throat. Neither religious edicts must be imposed on the people against their will, in matters like this, nor should the state force people to do in a certain manner against their will. Both are wrong. And Indian people generally are much more clear in these matters than most people recognize. They may not use the language, they may not tell you the ratio and the legal principle and all that, but they intuitively understand what makes sense, what does not.
Sir, as a doctor yourself, how do you think abortion should be viewed or understood from a medical perspective, sir? Is it a healthcare decision, a medical procedure, or something beyond medicine itself?
See, there are many dimensions to it. Ultimately, my body, my right. It's the woman who is bearing a baby in early stage of conception. The woman must decide, supposing there's a failure of contraception, an unexpected unwanted child. Supposing the woman already has X number of children, and they believe that they cannot handle that extra burden, they cannot really do justice to the child. Supposing they suffer from a certain illness and there is a potential hazard, mental or physical, to the woman's health. Supposing the baby has severe congenital abnormalities and therefore the baby's sustainability is very limited. So, what are the reasons? There are many reasons given. Once those reasons are available, the law is available, the decision must be entirely left to the woman. Indian law does not even say you must take the husband's consent. At best, you can say, all right, not the law, but in practice, the couple will decide, at best. Now, supposing we reject that, see the implications in medicine and in society. Even today, anemias of pregnancy are very common in India. Until recently, and when this law was enacted, toxemias of pregnancy, preeclampsia and eclampsia, were very, very common. Nowadays, mercifully, they have come down. High blood pressure, urea protein in urine, and other complications. Sometimes they could be fatal. They could seriously harm the mother or kill the mother, and of course, harm the baby. All these were very common. Now, you force the mother to bear a child which is unwanted in conditions where they cannot. What are you doing? To whom are you showing kindness? You are showing unspeakable cruelty to the baby and to the mother. 2. By definition, if a mother wants to abort the pregnancy, that means unwanted pregnancy, probably in difficult circumstances. Now, you force the mother to carry the baby to full term and deliver the baby, an unwanted baby, in difficult circumstances. Whom are you doing justice? To that family? To that baby? So, there are social repercussions. In fact, there is one theory. It doesn't apply to India because generally we have strong families, rich or poor. You must have heard of Stephen Levitt, the man who wrote Freakonomics, an unusual way of looking at economic matters. The crime rate in big cities in America was very, very high in 1960s and 70s. But with mid-80s onwards, crime rate fell dramatically. Many people said Bill Bratton, the police chief of New York City, Mayor Giuliani of New York City, etc. But it's not New York alone. In every significant city in America, crime rate fell at the same time. He investigated, he came out with the theory. Exactly 15, 16 years after Roe versus Wade judgment, crime rate began to fall dramatically. Why? Because when there was no abortion right, when unwanted pregnancies in poor single-parent families were there, where the mother could not take care of the baby, they are poor, and they don't have proper facilities to raise the child properly. Many of these children in the ghettoized atmosphere became part of criminal gangs. They were sucked into crime. Now, once those unwanted children disappeared because of Roe versus Wade, the recruiting ground for the criminal gangs disappeared. Crime came down. So, by doing something foolishly, governments can unleash forces which are very dangerous in society. We don't even understand. And the implications may be seen only after 10 or 15 years. You may not know what you're doing today. Because children born, their impact is felt after 15, 20 years, not today. So there are going to be social consequences. There are going to be rule of law consequences like violence on the streets and gangs and so on and so forth. And of course, there are going to be, in a country like India in particular, serious medical consequences both for the mother and the baby. And the family will have financial consequences. To bear an unwanted child in poverty, or more children than they can bear, and they want to limit their family because somebody has some bee in the bonnet and they impose the children on the family, it's an unbearable burden to the family and cruelty to the child. So beware. Indian families are very strong. Our families love their children. Our families are willing to sacrifice anything for their children. Let's not interfere unnecessarily.